Going, guys? It's your boy Mike from Seattle, and as the dutiful, efficient worker that I am presently driving across the state to a formal function with an attractive young lady here off camera holding the camera for me. We're headed to a fallen officer memorial, but I figured I would talk today about Gary, Indiana. A lot of people have been reaching out to me asking about Gary, Indiana, and Northwest Indiana, and what types of opportunities exist there to get started investing in real estate. This is a great question, and I love talking about this subject. I get calls all the time. I just had the privilege of speaking, I won't drop his name, but with a professional soccer player who played for the Iranian national team in 2014 and 2018. He lived my childhood dream. So that was very cool. But what I wanted to talk about Gary, some of the questions he had for me, I know a lot of people have out there is, hey man, Gary, Indiana was the 1993 murder capital of the country of the United States. It's got 3 times the national poverty rate. It has 3 times the crime rate of your average city. 13,000 buildings in the city of Gary, Indiana are abandoned. So who in their right mind would ever think investing there is a good idea? And these are understandable concerns and questions to have. And when you look at the city and the checkered past that it's had, and what happened to that city with deindustrialization back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, when we started shipping jobs overseas, the city of Gary was founded in 1906 by the United States Steel Corporation. And it was a steel mill city, much like many cities in the Rust Belt, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Indiana. A lot of the cities in those areas really struggled after jobs started getting shipped overseas, and we make fewer and fewer products here in the United States. And as those high-paying, good manufacturing jobs left the area of Northwest Indiana, all of the people who had those jobs had to go somewhere else. The city started becoming extremely depressed and began depopulating. At its height, it had nearly 200,000 people in the city. Now, unfortunately, it's only around 67,000. Now, if you're listening to me tell you this story and talk about the city, you're probably saying to yourself, again, why would anybody invest there? If you watch Bigger Pockets, if you watch stock real estate advice you get from a lot of these financial gurus, they tell you need to look for positive economic factors. You want to invest in growing cities. You want to make sure that there's all of these different metrics before you even consider investing somewhere. And a lot of people, a lot of these rich coastal elite real estate investors that have big time shows, they'll tell you can't make money investing in a low income, decreasing population, Midwest state. It's a flyover state. Avoid it at all costs. Don't do it. And I'm here to tell you a different story. And I'm not going to say you should or you shouldn't invest in Gary, but I'm going to tell you my story and the dozens of people that I'm friends with who own hundreds of rentals in this city, in this county, in this community. And we're all seeing a lot of success, the type of success that other people would tell you is impossible. And I just don't think it is. I think that Gary, Indiana, and the rest of Lake County and Northwest Indiana gets a bad reputation. And it's unfair because there is tons of opportunity for you or for anybody interested in investing in real estate to start with low cost properties. One of the biggest problems somebody like me who lives in the Seattle area has is that it's so expensive out here. I mean, the average price of a house in Seattle is like $900,000. It's insane. If you go across the water to Bellevue and Sammamish area, you're looking at $1 million as the average. It's very hard to get a loan for that. Your payment's obscene. You have to make exorbitant amounts of money, and it's impossible to cash flow properties out there when you're buying at those prices. So after I bought my first duplex in the area, in the Pierce County, Washington area, for $450,000 back in 2018, I said, you know what? It doesn't make sense to save 20% for a down payment on a $700,000 property. It's going to be very hard to cash flow. It's going to take me forever to save that money. I want to invest where the numbers make sense. So initially I started drawing circles further and further and further away from the center, which was Seattle. And I realized even going as far out of the state of Washington, 4 or 5 hours across the state to Spokane, it was still very expensive. And if I'm going to go 4, 5, 6 hours away, well, why don't I open up my range to the entire country and look for the best possible opportunity that there is out there? And that's where I started to consider Midwest states. Originally, I'm from North Dakota. I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I knew it was much cheaper there. So I started looking at North Dakota. Well, I made friends with someone in a short story. I'll make it a quick short story. I made friends with another investor who was investing in the Midwest, and specifically Gary. And he encouraged me, downright bullied me, into at least considering someplace like Gary, even though much like you, I did the same Google search and went, there's no way I'm investing here. This place looks like, it looks more like war-torn Syria than it does any part of the United States. But I said, you know what, whatever. I'll give it a shot. I took his advice. I made the phone calls. I networked with the people. I started doing the research, started doing the work. I had the daily discipline. I stayed consistent. And then I ended up buying my first rental property, which was a turnkey, which means rent ready, ready for somebody to move right in. A turnkey rental property. That was my first one for $60,000. Now, at the time, it only rented for $900 a month, and it had a $343 mortgage payment. Now, it rents for $1,250 a month, and still has the same $343 mortgage payment. So the cash flow that you can see in a city like Gary, just the simple math right there, that's $900 a month. Now, it's not all profit. I still got to pay a property manager, set aside money for my vacancies and maintenance. But it's, $500 or $600 a month in straight profit off of a $60,000 asset, single family home, newly remodeled. My down payment on a $60,000 house is a 20% down payment. That's only $12,000. So it's already paid for itself over and over and over again in the 4 years that I've now owned it. And there was no shortage of these types of properties and these types of deals back in 2020, 21, 22, and now in 2023, there's still no shortage of these types of deals. The only downside is lending has changed. Interest rates went up, cash flow's been affected nationwide because of lending, but Gary still seems to be one of the only cities where you still can get positive cash flow, albeit it's not as good as it was, but that's not a fault of Gary or the tenants, that's just a fault of lending. If you're an all cash buyer, you're still doing just as fine. Or if you're looking into seller financing, creative financing, or some other type of owner financing, you could still do really, really well. So that's one of my 13 rental units I have there. I've bought houses for as cheap as $29,000. I've bought them at the most expensive for $89,000. And so again, 13 rental units, all priced between $29,000 and $89,000. And they, the average rent probably $1,000, $1,100 a month. My average payment $350, $400 a month. You do the math. Over time, which is the most powerful component of real estate investing, the factor of time. Over time, rents go up, my payment stays the same. I play the cash flow game. Gary, Indiana is not an appreciation game. I've seen appreciation just like everywhere else in the country during 2020 and 21, during the pandemic when values were skyrocketing. I saw 20% increases to my properties as well, but 20% of 60,000 took it from 60,000 to 72,000. So it's not quite as monumental as my duplex in Seattle, which went from 450,000 to 800,000. That's a big gain. That's a big chunk of my net worth right there. So, however, I cash flow better in Indiana than I do in some place like Seattle. Now, the most important thing, the reason why I would want you to consider some place like Indiana, if you're like me and you don't have a lot of money, if you're like me and you're working really, really hard, working 60, 70 hours a week, pulling a bunch of overtime, you're trying your hardest to get on the property ladder, but you're discouraged, like I was, because it's so expensive and it seems so far out of reach. You don't think that there's any way you're ever going to make it happen. Don't write off the Midwest. Ohio, Oklahoma, Alabama, Indiana, a lot of these places have very low cost rental properties. Now, there's unique hurdles that come with it because there is crime. There are problems out there. You've got to know how to find the right tenants. That comes from building a good team. The number one thing I want you to take away from this conversation is how important it is to have a good network of other investors. The reason you want to make sure that you prioritize other investors in your network is because they are already investing successfully in your area. You want to find other investors who are successfully investing in whatever market you're interested in, and then ask them for referrals. Who's your property manager? Who's your real estate agent? Who's your contractor? Who's your plumber? Get the referrals from these people, and you get to skip to the front of the line skip to the front of the line where the success is, instead of sitting there trial by fire, hoping you find a good property manager, firing 4 of them, and then just tossing your hands up and giving up. I don't want to see that happen to you. So be like me and cheat. Cut to the front of the line, copy and paste somebody else's success into your life, thank them along the way, sing their praises. Thank you to my mentor, Mark. Thank you to my mentor, Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time. Thank you to my good friends, the Lumberjack Landlord and Dion from Dion Talk Financial Freedom. Spending more time around these real estate gurus who have, some of them hundreds of units, some of them only 18, worth tens of millions of dollars. Spending time around those types of people will help you level up. And that's the key to being successful in real estate. So don't write off Gary, Indiana. Don't write off the Midwest, and absolutely network more. Appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.